Hi, everyone. Welcome to Elevating Women in Entertainment. I'm Jennifer Beatty Yen, and we are honored today to welcome Hali Lee. Hali is a visionary leader with the AWGC, or Asian Women Giving Circle. It's a volunteer-driven fund of Asian American women based in New York City that supports artist activists and cultural changemakers. Since 2006, AWGC has invested in emerging and cutting-edge projects led by Asian American women and gender expansive artists, believing that funding isn't just charity, it can be activism. And as a past grantee myself, I can attest to both their generosity and their impact. Hali has been instrumental in expanding AWGC's reach, strengthening its community partnerships, and creating pathways for artists to amplify underrepresented voices. So, today, we'll explore how everyday people can help nurture artistic opportunity, as well as how all of you artists out there can tap into AWGC's resources and use those resources to push towards equity and justice in the arts. Hali, thank you so much for joining us. Are you ready to jump right in?
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure to be here, Jennifer.
A lot of people feel like it is very challenging to support the arts or underrepresented artists specifically in a very meaningful way. Or put another way, they said they felt they had to be an institutional insider. And the Asian Women Giving Circle has challenged that idea in a lot of respects. And so I was hoping you could share with us a little bit of background on the Asian Women Giving Circle, how it came to be, what it does, and how people can support its work.
We raise money and give it away. So we're about 20 to 25 women in the steering committee. And then maybe about 200 or so other people add their money to ours. And we basically collect a big pot of money every year and give it away once a year. We're fiscally sponsored at the Ms. Foundation for Women, which means everyone sends their money to the Ms. Foundation who wants to, be part of our pot. The Ms. Foundation keeps 10% as their sort of fee to manage us because we can be a little bit of a pain in the neck sometimes. And then we give everything else out the door as grants. And our grants year, sometimes we give away $60,000 a year, and this year we gave away almost 90,000. It just depends on the year, and how energetic we are. We're all volunteers, so there's pros and cons to that. We have lives and families and jobs, so it just depends on how energetic we are. We've always funded arts and activism since the very beginning, and I'm really proud of that. We haven't strayed from our focus, and we have funded a lot of women and projects multiple times. There's no limit on the number of times someone can apply, and I'm proud of that as well. So the Asian Women Giving Circle, we turned 20 years old this summer, Jennifer.
Congratulations.
And I just can't believe it. It's been a real sisterhood and so much fun, honestly, to get to do social change with my girlfriends, my buddies. So we're 20 years old, and the first circle, we were 10 women, and we're all based in New York City. And it was literally one of those moments in the shower where I was like, what's the thing that we can do to move money towards building a more just, joyful world? And it turns out that that group of women, that first group of 10 women, a lot of us were artists or wannabe artists or had been artists. And a lot of us were interested in social change and creating more, conditions for more just social change. And it was that combination of arts and social change and arts and activism that really spoke to us as individual humans, women, citizens, and also was kind of an area that was underexplored in the funding world. And we live in New York City, and there's a lot of philanthropy in New York City, but very little organized philanthropy by and for Asian American people, and even less for Asian American women, girls, and gender expansive folks. So this just seemed like a really good way to create a niche for ourselves as Asian women who wanted to do social good together, and also make an impact in the communities that we care about and that we call home. So it was just kind of a good match that fit us as people and also seemed strategically like a good area to fund. That wasn't getting a lot of funding. And we were really proud to support you a couple of times in your work as a legendary badass
I was a very grateful
social.
recipient. Yeah. For those that are not familiar, can you just sort of walk through the steps of exactly what Asian Women Giving Circle is, how it operates?
One unique thing about us, or maybe not unique, but one thing that I like about us is that everyone who gives even $1 to our grant making pot gets to vote on a finalist ballot of who's going to get the grants. And we do that because we want to democratize the way that philanthropy is practiced. And that's one of the things I address in my book. But I'm really proud that if you give $10,000, we love it. If you give $10, we love it. But you only get one vote, no matter the size of your donation.
That's amazing. And about how many would you say you fund per year? Does it depend on the year? And then how do people apply?
So it depends on how much money we raise. We give anywhere between 6 grants a year to 15. A few years ago, we sort of decided to rationalize our process a little bit. So now we only give $8,000 grants. Everyone gets the same amount
Only.
only. Yeah, and it's not that much. I wish it could be more. I really, really wish it could be more.
It's
And
a
we have to say
lot
no to
for
but as we know, artists and activists are really smart at using money.
funds, for sure.
Yes, and the stuff that people create with the money that we give them is astounding and amazing. So we only do one grant cycle a year. We usually release the RFP in January, and uh, they're usually due, I think, end of March kind of thing, and we give the money away in June, though we might scooch that to July just because of the Ms. Foundation's fiscal year, and we have to follow their fiscal year because we're like fiscally sponsored by them. So only one grant cycle a year. Grant size is always $8,000 now. So we try to keep the questions and budget super easy. We are limited a little bit because the Ms. Foundation they give much bigger grants, and we are under that we have to use their
Umbrella.
portal, for the applications and the budget stuff. So, but we work it out with them to try to keep it as simple as possible.
That makes sense. From your experience, what are the biggest gaps or barriers that emerging Asian American women creatives or gender expansive artists face, and how does AWGC try to kind of bridge those gaps?
Well, we're so small, I can't even say we bridge. I wish we could give away 100 times more money and then we could maybe be a bridge. I mean, there's just so little funding by and for Asian American women, people, creatives, period. There's so much more that could be built in terms of philanthropic infrastructure so that more money could go and flow to creative people generally, because I think they're so important for imagining a world that's that serves all of us, and our planet. Um, so I just wish there was more funding generally. And now with the freezing and drying up of so much federal funding, the landscape is just terrible. So I'm just out there all the time begging, nudging, cheerleading individual donors to step up in this moment
When
when
it
it's so bleak, like in the institutional and government funding landscape is just so hard right now. So it's a moment for individuals to step up. And I think giving circles where individuals can come together to do good together, it's just such a great vehicle for this moment that we're in right now.
yeah.
Um, there's very little organized philanthropy by and for Asian American people, both on the funding side and the receiving side. So there's a huge opportunity there for anyone listening who wants to start a giving circle, or call me. I'll help you. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
As my friend Fabiana Rodriguez often says, culture moves faster than politics. And the way I understand that to be is that in order to make the social change that we want, which is building a more equitable, just, joyful future for all of us, women, queer folks, immigrants, all of us who live in this beautiful country, we have to change hearts and minds. And one of the best strategies, I think, to get there is to share stories, pictures, words, TV shows, movies, plays, drama, all the way, poetry, all the ways that can touch, that we can see, hear, feel, and touch what it looks like to imagine a world in which all of us are free and living our lives full of dignity and doing the things we want. And I think stories and narrative and arts and culture are really the way to do that. I think Fabiana is completely right, as are Bridget Antoinette Evans at Pop Culture Collaborative, one of the smartest thinkers about cultural strategy and narrative strategy for social change. Um, social change is political change is preceded by culture change, and
Mm.
artists and imaginators, imagination people are experts at tilling the soil of culture to get to the culture change we need, to get to the political change we need.
This is something so exciting, I think, because it's so empowering, not just for the artist who gets, and I know you're saying it's a small amount of money, but as an artist who's been a recipient, it's a lot of money. It's tremendous, both for the recipient to have the freedom to use these funds to do something amazing, but also for the donors who can actually have impact. That they might have felt they didn't have before. And then they have even more impact because it's amplified by all the other members. But kind of on that topic, for artists who are new to AWGC or are kind of intimidated by grant making institutions, the whole grant writing process, what advice would you give them in terms of preparing, reaching out, positioning their work to access the Giving Circle's resources or kind of make themselves more grant ready?
It's a truism, I think, that relationships are the core piece of building an organization, building a funding pipeline for a project or an organization. There's a really good resource in New York City. You know, the Asian Women Giving Circle, we're in New York City and we fund projects led by mostly in New York City, by and for New York City people, 5 boroughs. The Asian American Arts Alliance, A4, as it's sort of shorthand called, is a great resource and community for Asian American creatives in New York City, and they always post funding opportunities. I think they do monthly sort of pitch
Town
sessions where
halls, yeah,
we get
where you
town
can,
halls
yeah.
where we've gone when it's when our proposals are out, and also artists go and share their work, and like everything from like I need studio space or I need to find a sound engineer, like all sorts of stuff shows up on their job boards and connect boards. So that's a really good resource for us. Like the women, the steering committee of the Asian Women Giving Circles, we're fairly diverse in terms of our jobs and our ethnicities and Asian American backgrounds and where we are in our careers and families, et cetera. But we go to a lot of stuff. We go to, because we fund arts and narrative and social change, we go see a lot of arts and narrative and social change. So invite us to your things, get on our mailing list and we'll come. Like there's 20 of us on the steering committee, and obviously we can't go to everything, but we end up going to a lot and we talk about it. If that's a good way, just meet us as humans, and
Kind of show what you got.
we show up. Yeah, we really go see a lot of stuff, and we love to do that because not only do we fund in this area, but we're also fans of of the bodies of work that our grantee partners and brilliant friends and allies have been putting on.
I want to go back to what you were talking about before, because although we're not political organizations, Film Lab or Elevating Women in Entertainment or Asian Women Giving Circle, our missions are promoting equality and inclusion, and particularly in terms of arts funding, as you mentioned. Currently, federally, when we look at the federal government, it's been pretty staunchly opposed to giving funds to programs it deems supportive of diversity, equality, inclusion. And so, you talked about how AWGC is all volunteer right now, and Film Lab currently has no federal funding. We're operating also with unpaid staff right now. And in many ways, those of us who remain to do this work are very privileged. We have great educational backgrounds and degrees and resources that allow us this what is really a luxury of being able to volunteer to promote the arts. And for the average person, priority may be more on getting food on the table, making sure power stays on, keeping a roof over the head. So like when we see the rise of racism, of xenophobia, of all these other issues in society, we often see the focus kind of understandably going back to those basic necessities, and things like the arts fall to the bottom of the list in terms of priority. But I think, you mentioned already that the arts are just such an incredible resource and tool for not just, obviously creating joy, which we need so much right now, joy and beauty in our lives, but also as a tool for creating that bridge and that constructive dialogue for bringing people together, especially people with differing viewpoints, or giving you an avenue to see another viewpoint that you never might have thought before. So my question is sort of, how do we protect that when basic needs are not being met? How do we protect the arts? And obviously, you're doing it with Asian Women's Giving Circle, but I'd love to hear your insights on that generally, and particularly as someone who has kind of
gone outside the system, as it were. How would you advise creatives who are struggling to survive right now?
It's just a bleak time. I don't want to minimize for anyone how hard it is right now to keep the lights on and pay staff and buy food and help care for elderly family members and help care for children. I mean, it is rough out there. And I have a lot of friends who work in international aid, and the USAID withdrawals is, it's just been devastating for people with jobs, who were doing really good work in other countries. It's terrible out there. All I can say is that from my point of view, as a small donor, mid-level donor, and as the founder of the Asian Women Giving Circle, we are not going anywhere. We're doubling down on trying to raise more money to support our community of imaginative artists, activists, change makers. We're not backing down from that at all. We remain completely firm in our commitment to funding Asian American women, girls, and gender expansive people who are using the tools of arts, culture, and narrative to bring about and imagine a more just world in our communities and, in fact, in our country. I also think, like I said before, that it's really an important moment for individuals with any means, whether it's $10 a month or $10,000 a month, whatever it is, to continue to give, and I know from my work in this sector and in philanthropy that no one just gives to one thing. We all individuals, not foundations, we shop, we hire people, we vote, we can choose to shop at, wherever we shop. We can choose to support small business owners. We can choose to eat at restaurants that are owned by immigrants and women. We make a lot of choices as people moving our money in the world. Every dollar spent could be a values decision. Not that it has to be, but it could be. Let's not get paralyzed about overthinking everything. But we can think about where we spend our dollars, not just philanthropically. And certainly with our philanthropy and investing dollars, we can think about where it's going. And we have to. And this is a moment where it's so rough out there federally, government landscape, and foundation institutional landscape. So this is a moment that individuals can and should and are leaning into their power even more. And one of the ways to use our power is by where we spend our dollars and invest, spend, give, and also where we spend and invest and give our time as volunteers. I know that individuals do lots of things, like we volunteer our time, we vote, we invest, we spend, and we give. And where can we use all of our 5 T's, time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties to move alongside our values in order to build our blocks, neighborhoods, and communities and cities that we want to see.
Quickly, could you tell us a favorite or just a really fun story of a grantee that Asian Women Giving Circle supported and what they did?
This is one that's in my book that I really love, and I'll tell you why. So I'll tell this story quickly. It was 2009, and a group of young activists applied for a grant to crash the party that is the official Chinatown Lunar New Year parade, the March, the Dragon Parade that happens every Lunar New Year. And until that point, you weren't allowed to be gay and out and march in that parade. So this group of young activists, Asian American activists, applied for a grant to the Asian Women Giving Circle so that they could crash the party by um, they didn't get official permission to march, but they were going to go anyways. And we, of course, we were like, yes, we're right there with you here. Yes, we're going to fund you. And we want to march with you because, how fun is that? So the night before the day of the parade, this group actually got permission to march. And one of them called me and they were kind of bummed because they wanted to crush the party, but they got permission, which is awesome. And then we marched with them. It was a beautiful, cold, one of those New York City winter, crisp, beautiful, gorgeous days. It was February that year in 2009. And we marched and it was a blast. And so they had the dragon puppets, but rainbow colored. And it was so fun. That night, Peter and I were cooking dinner with our kids. And this activist group is called Q Wave. They were on our local NPR affiliate, WNYC. This story was covered in Time Out New York. And I think they also made the Times, but that I don't 100% remember. But the reason they made the news is because they made history. For the first time ever, you could be gay, queer, and trans and out and march in that parade. And here's the thing to remember, I think, about this story. First of all, they made history, right? A group of activists made history. They beat the Irish in this regard. And the size of the grant that they asked for from the Asian Women Giving Circle was $4,000. I'm pretty sure that our $4,000 paid for beer and Oreos and art supplies so they could make the banners and the pups and all that stuff. And I'm also pretty sure that we were their only funder who wasn't an actual blood relative, right? So what can we learn from this story? One, that small dollars can make big change, that a group of, middle class, middle-aged, upper middle class, whatever ladies can stand alongside a group of young activists to make history together, that arts and activism and using the spectacle of parades and creativity and puppets and parades to join the party that is that parade can be part of making history. And that parade's been integrated to include gay and queer folks since that day. And it's, that's so awesome. And another slanty-eyed mama, Kate Rigg, who we have funded multiple times also. She said to us that getting a grant from us was the first time she got money from a funding partner that looked like her, right? So she had never received Asian American funding before. And she said getting a grant from the Asian Women Giving Circle felt like having a group of aunties cheering on the sidelines, which made me cry and kind of makes me cry. I mean, if I die tomorrow, I want that on my tombstone. And, that's just like doesn't happen in the philanthropic funding world. But how great is that? Like what a compliment, to be aunties cheering on the sideline. So we love to lean in to being the aunties cheering on the sideline, and that's why I told you before, like we show up to stuff, we go to stuff, like invite us to stuff. And we obviously can't go to everything, but our little steering committee email chain is pretty active with, hey, can someone go to this, send pictures, blah, blah, blah. So, we really try to show up because we love our communities in New York City. We are of our communities in New York City. And in our sector, it's called like being proximate. And it's hard for funding partners and grantee partners to really be in community with one another, because there's a power chasm that can exist between the people who are giving money or collecting it and giving it and the people who are receiving the money. But in my opinion, and I write about this in my book, the chasm, that power chasm that can exist there is a little bit lessened. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit lessened because most giving circles live within the communities that they give to. So we see each other at stuff and we go to each other's stuff, and it's a little bit less. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit less.
No, that's wonderful. Like this wonderful, what an auntie thing to do too, go out and support and be a part of it and everything else.
Yeah.
You alluded to this a minute ago, but this is my last question. You just wrote a book. Congratulations. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that and how they can get your book?
Here's my book.
There's your book.
Yeah. I am trying to sell my book, so here's my book. And it was really fun to write. So it's really a story. Well, quickly, I guess, the context of this book is the context really is the wealth divide. Like there's just so much wealth concentrated at the very top. In the sectors of social change, social impact, nonprofits, and philanthropy, a big billionaire, rich guy knows best philanthropy has been sort of the prevalent frame for the past 20, 30 years. I nicknamed that top down, honestly, kind of autocratic philanthropy. I nicknamed that style Big Phil. Because it's often a guy, even though Big Philippa is doing some cool work right now, but it's often a white guy with a lot of money who's calling the shots for the past 20, 30 years in our
Choosing
sector.
which stories get to be seen, which stories get to be told, right?
Yes, and and they're the boss because they've got the money. So that's the first third of my book is kind of a critique of Big Phil, and then the bulk of my book, the remaining 2/3, is stories of the rest of us, and the summary of that 2/3 of my book is literally like look up, link arms, and go do a thing together. And my book is full of stories of regular non-millionaire citizens across America who are literally doing that, looking up, linking arms, and doing things together. And they might be political sector things, they might be kids in Arizona who are pulling their money to fund after school programs for kids, animal shelters, and hunger programs in their town in Arizona. It might be a group of neighbors in Brooklyn who are funding organizing. You know, it might be a group of moms whose kids went to preschool together who now are focusing on flipping state legislatures across the country. There's so many cool collective actions happening around the country. And the fun thing is that and I sort of recall that, you know, in Korean it's called ige, Mexican people call it, Mexican American friends call them tandas. You might have heard of susu or isusu or mahiber or Andine, who's Indonesian, she calls them arisan. These cultural forms of collective care and mutual aid and community love and community justice. We've been practicing these things always from long before philanthropy even existed as a professional field and sector. So, in a funny way, what I write in my book is to look forward to a more democratic form of philanthropy and giving back. One thing we should do is look back to how our aunties and our grandmas and great grandmas and great grandpas and uncles practiced community care, love, and justice back in the day, you know? And by the way, doing collective care and generosity and philanthropy in this manner, which is linking arms and doing it together, is a form of civic engagement and is a way to exercise our civic engagement muscles. And if ever there was a time when we in this country need to exercise our civic engagement muscles, it is right now.
Yeah.
And you can buy my book anywhere books are sold. Go to bookshop.org because it sends money to independent booksellers around the country, bookshop.org, and it's on there. There's an audiobook. I narrate the audiobook, so I could put you to sleep for several nights in a row if you
She
want
will
to
not put you to, she will not put anybody to sleep. All right, bookshop.org, everybody. Hali, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for all that you do for artists, for donors, empowering everybody all around and supporting the community. I think you're amazing.
You're amazing. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.